This episode is brought to you by CBS All Access. If you don't already subscribe to CBS All Access, please use our affiliate link by going to talkthroughmedia.com/CBS. Using our affiliate link gives us a little credit, which helps us to keep bringing you great content. U.S. residents only. Hello, and welcome to episode 46 of the Star Trek Discovery Podcast. I'm Brian.
And I'm Ruthie.
And we will be covering Season 2, Episode 3 of the short treks titled Ask Not. All right, well, before we get started with the feedback for Ask Not, we do have some feedback that have been going back for the last month or two on Twitter, and we thought we would highlight it here. So let's open the hailing frequencies. Okay, so our first one is from Daniel Peter Hitch. And I know he's joined the Facebook group, but he says, "Hi, new listener. Just subscribed after a friend in the at Star Trek TNC podcast group recommended the show, and that I know is Star Trek The Next Conversation, which is hosted by Matt Mira, who used to be the host of After Trek, by the way, and Andrew Secunda. And they do a really great Next Generation podcast, and I've been listening to them as well." He says, "Gonna go back and listen to all the disco content I missed. Looking forward to watching them, listening along." And then he says, "Only through the intro pods, as I've been playing catch up from the kids being off school, but so far, love that you guys are being cautious and fair, open and accepting of change. So many pods I'm finding are just instant hate from the first trailer and nothing more." Well, thank you so much. And I think we've heard from you since that you've gone back and listened to the rest. So thank you so much, Daniel. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and that's at Hitch_Daniel.
Yep. All right. And I believe the next one it's Sec31 Trek. That's at Sec31T. And I believe, if I wanted to take a guess, this is LT from NC, although not specifically identified as such. But he says, assuming it is, "One of my goals this year has been to support the podcast I listen to, even if it isn't a lot of money. That's you." And he highlights Walking Dead GSM, which is we still haven't changed the name of that one. We'll probably do that over the hiatus. But the Walking Dead podcast, Trek Geeks, Trek FM, Star Trek TTM, which is us, Daily Trek News, and Priority One Pod. So I actually listen to all of those.
Cool.
So, yeah. Well, thank you so much, LT, and thank you for your support. You're like one of our first Patreon supporters. So thank you.
This is LT.
Assuming this is LT, but
if it's not, thank you still.
Let me put it to you this way. There is only one supporter that I know of that is supporting both the Star Trek podcast that we do and the Walking Dead podcast that I do, and that's LT from NC. So I'm assuming that,
Seems like a safe assumption, but
yes, I'm not exactly
assume.
having to be Sherlock Holmes with that assumption. I'm reasonably confident in the fact that it is him. Anyway, thank you so much. Assuming it's LT, but I'm pretty sure it is. And the last one is from Ken from Chicago. And there was a whole bunch of other stuff that was in threads, but this one seemed to be the only one that was dedicated to us. So he says, by the way, and we'll just give our own Twitters here, at Brian J. Malash, that's my personal Twitter, and at Sooner Girl with 3 R's, that's Ruthie's. Congrats on the new at Star Trek TTM and Picard Cast at Picard Cast Podcasts. Thumbs up and live long and prosper. Vulcan salute. Hashtag LLAP. Well, thank you so much, Ken.
Yeah.
And good to hear from you. You've been a good supporter on Twitter for us from the beginning. So the season 2, episode 3, titled Ask Not, is written by a name that I recognized immediately as being a writer from the Walking Dead universe, Kalinda Vazquez. And Ruthie, you wouldn't have known her because she was a co-executive producer on Fear the Walking Dead after you left the show. So you wouldn't know her, but she was a co-executive producer of Fear the Walking Dead season 4. And she wrote 2 of the better episodes of the dismal second half of season 4. Season 4, episode 12, titled Weak, and season 4, episode 15, titled I Lose People. And that one was, I think, probably the best episode of the season 4 second half. The episode was directed by Sanji Senaka, and he's actually director of 19 credits, but they seem to all be videos. So this is his pretty much anyway. There's a few other things he did, documentary shorts, but most of them are music videos. And looks like he's been directing music videos for a while now. So the description from CBS.com is: when an attack on Starbase 28 leaves a surprise prisoner under Cadet Thera Sidhu's watch, this has brackets, Amrit Kaur, she is faced with making a decision that may threaten her standing in Starfleet. That is TVPG, air date of November 14th, 2019. All right. So, Ruthie, how would you rate Ask Not?
I would say I'm thinking probably an 8.5.
8.5. I would also give it an 8.5. Cadet Simulations. All right. Well, let's see what listeners thought of Ask Not. We only got 2 ratings.
All right. James, the Augmented Sailor, says Ask Not gets 6-point counterpoint Starfleet regulation citations.
And LT from NC says, I'm going for 9.5 out of 10 regulation spouting pikes. And that's from his feedback post that he sent us through the talkthroughmedia.com feedback form. But on the Facebook group, he originally gave it a 9.8. So
did he delete that comment or something?
No, he kept it, but I thought it would show both.
What Facebook thread are you talking about then?
Yeah, it's there. It says, I forgot. Saturday ended up being crazy busy. I was going to give it 9.8 out of 10, and I really loved it. Totally my bad.
Oh.
So it's there.
So then he did that, and then he changed it?
Yeah. Yeah, he changed it.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, let's move on to our yeses.
Yes!
We only got 1 yes, and that's from James, the Augmented Sailor. And he says, Pike episode. That is very true. What did you have for yeses?
I didn't really have specific yeses and nos for this particular trek.
Yeah, well, I could understand that. I would say that I appreciated the regulation spouting stuff, and to see at the end the shot of number one and Spock basically greeting them at the transporter. So we see Pike, Spock, and number one. Actually, probably should say Pike, number one, and Spock to show it in the proper order. But to show that and more on that in my Hold Your Horses. So, but I thought it was fitting because it had this kind of until later kind of feeling on it at the end. Because it's kind of like, well, this is the last thing you're going to see of us in the short tracks. But, we don't know that for sure, by the way, but that's kind of the impression that I got. And that you'll be seeing us later. So I don't know if that is in fact the case, but we'll see. All right. So that's basically it I have for the yeses. I may think of some other stuff to bring up as we go, but let's go on to the no's.
No!
That always makes me laugh.
All right, James the Augmented Sailor says, more huge voids on the Enterprise with the engineering space being so large and open. The test on the cadet. I'll get more into these in my main feedback.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal on that. But, well, I only had one no, and Ruthie, you'll be shocked that I brought this up. It was too short. I mean, okay, they're called short tracks, but this one was really short. I mean, it was basically over into the 7 minutes, and then there was a long list of credits for this one, which also made me think that that's why this is like the end of this series of short tracks, because like I said for the last one, in our last episode, that the next two are animated and the final one is Picard related. So it makes you think that they're not tied into the rest of them. But that said, it was really short and almost seemed like they stretched it long just to make it fit into the 10 to 15 minute format. But even then it didn't make it, because at least in the US it was 9 minutes and something. So it was really short.
Mm-hmm.
They could have padded it a little bit more, but I guess it made it pop. So it being as short as it was, it really got to the beat of it.
Yeah, I was going to say padding isn't necessarily good.
No, I agree with that. I agree. So
because something is long doesn't mean better.
Very true.
Quality, not quantity.
Right. Anyway. All right. So let's move on to our Hold Your Horses.
Hello, this is Captain Tilly. What the hell? What the hell? Hold your horses.
I miss you, Tilly. James the Augmented Sailor says Pike being a little gung-ho about destroying Tholians in this dialogue. I know it's a simulation, but man, that just seems out of character for a guy with Pike's reputation. And my take on it was, I think it works if you consider that Sidhu doesn't really know Pike. So, she only knows based on his reputation. But I mean, the whole short track did seem to kind of wasn't intended to push her buttons. I mean, the one thing that you could say that I didn't bring up earlier is that, and I think someone mentioned it in their feedback. I'd have to look at it a little closer, but coming of age from TNG season 1, like it reminds me of the test, as Wesley Crusher called it, the psych test. It was similar to that in terms of kind of being a simulation. But I think the difference with it is that Crusher or Wesley knew that it was a test. Like he was expecting a test, where I think the Sidhu did not know that this was a test. And this came from number one, who is showing that she's a bit sadistic, I think. But he continues, he says, another mutiny right out of the gate? This gave away that it was a sim. I can understand one overturned mutiny in Starfleet records, but two is a bit of a stretch. And yeah, I agree with that. I know at one point in it, near the end of the simulation, I was just like, really? For example, Pike said something about shooting them out of the sky or something like that, or they deserved it, which is like his first point. And this is not something that we know Pike would say. Like, this is even mentioned in the first Short Trek Q&A, where he looks at violence as a failure, right? So, and do you have any hold your horses?
No, I just also knew that it was a simulation right away. Like immediately I was like, oh, this is a test for her.
I didn't realize it right away, but I within 30 seconds or something, I knew that something was up.
I mean, I knew it because I could tell it was Pike under the hood. I was like, I know this is Pike under the hood. And if this is Pike under the hood, it's definitely a test for her. So I don't know why I knew it was Pike under the hood. Maybe it was because it was the gold shirt. And I don't know. I just knew, like immediately I knew when I'm like, why would they bring an officer or it just, the whole thing smacked of
staged.
Yeah. This is a test. This is definitely a test for her. I don't know why.
You're on candid camera.
Yeah. And it was just like, I don't know why she didn't get it, but she did.
Well, I think it did have a lot of things to suggest that, something was going on. Like, it was rock. There were explosions.
It was definitely one of those situations where it's like
exploding consoles.
Yeah, well, that and the fact that I don't know if this is an age-old question, but this has definitely been something that has been addressed in movies in the past. Like, what do you do if a nuclear submarine receives launch codes and they were not correct or something? And then you're ordered into radio silence, and the XO has problems with it, but the captain is gung-ho, and so it's kind of like, what do you do, kind of a situation. So I don't know, to me that felt sort of like that. Do you accept that what you're being told is absolute, and the fact that based on what you're being told, you're going to start World War III if you launch those missiles? How sure can you be? Yes, the codes are correct. Yes, this, that, and, whatever. But at the same time, you're going to start World War III if you launch those nuclear missiles. So it's that kind of a situation. Like, what do you do? And she's in that situation where she has to decide to launch or not launch, basically, I think. So.
Right. My hold your horses is pretty simple. And I kind of hinted at this during the episode. We had the credits start where there was a lot of time left in the whole episode before the end of the episode. So, and I had been kind of trained for a post-credit scene from the last episode with a commercial. So I was expecting a commercial from CBS All Access telling us, coming soon, the Star Trek 1701 series, or the new Star Trek movie coming to CBS All Access starring Anson Mount, Ethan Peck, and Rebecca Romaine. So I was expecting a series announcement here, and it didn't get it. So that was my hold your horses. But like I said, I think it was partially that and partially looking at the time, seeing how much time was left. But it certainly seemed to suggested when I first saw it, like, maybe there's going to be something at the end, and it just was a long series of credits this time. So nope, nothing at the end. So we still don't have a Pike show. So that's unfortunate, but I do have more on the news for that. Something that I wanted to cover, but didn't cover it for the last one. That's it for Hold Your Horses. Let's move on to our feedback section and open hailing frequencies. Okay, so we have a voicemail from our good friend Fred from the Netherlands.
Hello, Brian and Ruthie. This is Fred from the Netherlands with some feedback for the 7th short track, Ask Not. Long time no here. And first off, I want to make a big compliment to Brian's endurance, because I know he had a lot of technical problems with Facebook and getting the whole Talk Through Media website set up. And I have to compliment you, Brian, and other people that worked on it. It looks really very, very nice. And it's just silly that there are some technical problems, but I'm very much convinced that you will eventually all master them. Since my last short written feedback on the short track number 5, and now I visited the United States and was in St. Louis for Herpapalooza, an event convention about Winona Earp. And on my way home, I visited the studio of Dave and Wayne, or actually I met Dave and Wayne and visited Dave's studio to record a special episode on how TV series bring people together. Well, Brian and Rosie, the same is true for us, although we didn't meet in real life yet. But doing a lot together for all these nice podcasts and nice series, it really brings people together. Okay, now about Ask Not. I really like this episode, and having a big shot captain against a simple ensign. I think the ensign did a very nice job keeping herself strong against this big, impressive captain. I think it was funny that they quoted each other rules and regulations. And I think the ensign studied really a lot. It did feel a little off, so it was partly a surprise, but, well, with these short tracks, you never know how it will intertwine into the Star Trek universe. For instance, how could we imagine having Discovery into the future 1,000 years in the short track Calypso? And now we all know how that is intertwined into the Discovery story. And the same was true for the first half of this short track. But then we got into a kind of Kobayashi Maru situation. It was a test, and I think the ensign did it very well. Difference with the Kobayashi Maru is, of course, that Kirk knew it was a test, and this ensign didn't. Talking about Kirk, I have a very nice treat. In March, I will go to a theater in Amsterdam and will watch Wrath of Khan together with my 16-year-old son, and then we will meet the real Captain Kirk, aka William Shatner, 88 years. So I'm very much looking forward to that, as Ruthie did. Did you visit already this treat, Ruthie, together with your father? Because you told us that you were planning to do that. I have to say, by the way, that watching this short track, I did rewatch The Trouble with Edward and also Q&A. And I do appreciate Q&A after rewatching much more. The very close-up interaction between Spock and Number One and the subtlety there. Yeah, I could appreciate that more than the first time, because the first time I was not so enthusiastic about that short track. Too much technobabble and too static. But if you look at the interhuman, or should you say human? Spock is half human. Whatever. It's actually quite nice. Okay, this was all for this time. Great, all the best, Fred from the Netherlands, until probably Picard.
Oh, thank you so much, Fred, as usual, for your wonderful voicemail and everything you do for us.
But to answer your question, nope, it's in February. On Valentine's Day.
Yeah, Valentine's Day. Yes. And we will be knee-deep in Picard at that time, so you'll get to hear for 2 captains that week.
Yes. Very excited.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you went back and appreciated the first 2 short treks. And, we recorded the Trouble with Edward just prior to this recording. So you haven't heard that one back yet. But as far as we've had various technical issues, like there were some things that weren't working on the website for a while. And then, of course, we had the issues with Facebook, which have cleared up. And I should mention, they just started clearing up. We think that either like it just did it on its own with Facebook, some kind of time thing had happened. read that those kind of suspensions are lifted after 30 days, but this was lifted. It was more than 30 days. So I don't know, but I never
Plus,
got
other
it.
people have had it for longer than 30
Yeah.
days.
And I didn't get any notification. If I look at the things that I've listed for support, they still say that they're under review. It doesn't say that it's been resolved or that it's been looked at or reviewed. It just suddenly shows that it's working again. So I don't know what to make of it. But yeah, even there, looking at this again, December 1st, Sunday, December 1st, it still shows in review. And those things were put in review Saturday, October 19th. So, but I'm not complaining.
Right. We're not looking a gift horse in the mouth.
Right. We are very happy that things are resolved, and we hope that they continue to be. And note to self, just anything that you post on Facebook or Instagram, even if it is a private message between two people, that is looked at by Facebook. So just a cautionary tale to anyone out there. Don't put anything up that you think Facebook may not like.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Which is hard to say because, anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
It's resolved. Let's move on.
Yeah, we are moving on. Definitely. So anyway, thank you so much, Fred. And
yeah. And thank you, Brian, for all the hard work you do.
It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, and I'm glad that for the most part, I mean, we're still tweaking the website a little bit. I put some new links on the website just yesterday, so trying to make it easier for people to find us. And yeah, so we were just making sure that our podcast is available on more clients. So
well, I am also publicly acknowledging all the hard work you do, and thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And hopefully we'll reap some of the benefits of that hard work. So yeah. I'm just hoping that more people find us and appreciate the work that we do. So yeah, I think we produce, mind you, if you're looking for a short, like 20-minute evaluation of what the episode is,
this show is not for you.
Yeah, that's not us. And that's not the Walking Dead talk through either. We go through stuff with a fine-tooth comb, but we also, you guys make the podcast. It is your content that fuels it. We just simply guide it and direct it and, add our own to it. But our podcasts are very much a growth of our outreach to our listeners. So our listeners make this podcast and will make Picard. That first episode of Picard, that was not going to represent the rest of that show. It's going to be much like this show where feedback is so vital. So,
and if it ever gets to the point where we have hundreds of feedback, perhaps we'll revisit. But at this point in time, that does not seem likely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my take as well. It's like if it gets way too much, then we'll revisit it. But as long as it is stuff that we can do, we understand, we had a discussion on Facebook about like just trimming certain things. And that's something that we definitely want to do. We don't want to make episodes like really, really long. But if the content's there, we're going to publish it. So we just want to make sure that it's good stuff. Like I've heard some podcasts that like keep in, going to, talk to your son or a dog, interrupts things, or you go answer the door.
Oh, wow.
I've heard all of those things in podcasts. We'll never hear that from us. So we're heavily edited, and even though we're long, we edit quite a lot of it out. So
yeah, you would not believe what you don't hear.
Yeah. We had some examples of that in the last episode. There's some stuff that you're not going to hear that we talked about.
That's right.
Anyway.
It's the magic behind the curtain.
All right. Next is from James. You want to read that one?
Okay. James, the augmented sailor, says, I really wanted to like this short more, but it was very problematic to me. First, the test is really extreme to me. This is an officer candidate trying to get a semester in engineering on Enterprise. The test has nothing to do with engineering from her uniform. She wants to be an engineer. She'll probably not have to face decisions like these as a cadet or even a junior officer. A better test would be how she reacts to a major engineering casualty mixed in with personnel casualties, how she sorts them out. A test like this can better tell how suited she is to the billet she's filling, how well she does in responding to the engineering casualties and prioritizing them over the personnel casualties is really what needs to be tested here, not whether or not she backs a mutineer, considering from the premise of the sim, they were probably neither at war at this time, and mutiny is pretty much unheard of in Starfleet. Sorry, I'm being a little long-winded here, but this one just sticks in my proverbial craw. This is what happens sometimes when you have a sailor watch something that's heavily influenced by maritime tradition. The enormous spaces inside the shops are becoming a no for me because, while I get it, bigger is better, it's just starting to be a bit unbelievable in its tactical disadvantage, especially with the entire premise of this episode. I'm hoping they move away from this in the future. I know I'm being really harsh on this episode, but it's really because of the way my mind is conditioned to look at these things. I think if I weren't a sailor, I would have given it a much higher rating. The performances were great, and hey, it's a Pike episode. I really hope they're building up our interests in Pike's Enterprise because there will be a huge payoff, and they make that announcement we're all hoping for soon, that we're going to see a Pike series. Anyway, sorry so late with the feedback, guys.
That's okay. I mean, we delayed and we didn't record the Trouble with Edward, so I think some people were kind of holding out for that. And the fact that it was so short, I mean, you know, what are you going to say about something so short? It's great, or, you know.
Right. Or it wasn't great. Yeah. It's hard to really, like, deep dive critique something when it's really short. There's just not enough there.
Yeah. Your point about the test itself not being appropriate for her billet, I can see where you're coming with that, because it isn't a good engineering test. Like, it seems to be, since I mentioned it earlier, the test that Wesley got in Coming of Age would be a more appropriate test, it seems, than what she got here. But I guess, you know, maybe they were testing a certain
character.
Yeah, a certain character, not so much her engineering specialty.
Skills.
Yeah.
Yeah. I completely agree. I can see how this might be a stretch for, I mean, to me, this is strictly a character test, not a test of skill. And I would say it reminds me more of the Kobayashi Maru test rather than the test that Wesley got. Just because, I mean, it's not really even like the Kobayashi Maru, because the Kobayashi Maru has it's a no-win scenario.
No-win scenario, yeah.
So that's not this. I mean, this, I think, clearly has a win scenario. You can win this one. You can do... And I feel like she did, obviously, and Pike agreed. So, I don't know. But yeah, I think you're right. Maybe it was a bit of a stretch for a cadet.
You know, it's kind of funny. We didn't mention it before, but it reminds me of the real... I say real life scenario, obviously not real life scenario, but the scenario that Riker went in, that we hear about in the Pegasus, where he backed Captain Pressman in a mutiny. The officers mutinied and he backed the captain. So it was the opposite reaction to what Cadet Sidhu did, where it would have been Riker would have instead kept Pressman under guard. Instead, Riker backed Pressman and led them against him. So it is funny. It does remind me of that. But as far as the rest, the one thing I didn't mention it earlier, and I thought it was in your feedback, but I didn't see it. Maybe it's somewhere else. I was looking to see if LT had mentioned it in the next bit of feedback that we get, but I don't see it there either. That was a very shiny looking engineering update that, some people kind of took exception that it was almost too updated. But then again, I tend to think that if they've done this, made a special engineering set, that they're going to use it again, and we're going to see it, but we're not obviously going to see it in Discovery unless they redress it a little bit, and like we actually see the warp drive in Discovery. But anyway, the point being is it looks quite a bit different in at least its dimensions than what we see on the original series. But then again, the original series engineering was 1966 tech. So, that whole thing. I mean, to me, that argument for me personally was put to bed in the Talos 4 episode from the season 2 of Discovery. What that proved to me is that Star Trek from original series is this Star Trek. It's the same. It just looks more updated. That it's just a visual change. That's it. So I'm okay with them updating the look of the engineering, and for that matter, the Enterprise, because it fits the rest of Discovery. And we've talked about that ad infinitum. I think that ship has sailed
ad nauseum.
If you can accept it, I don't know. To me, I think you're missing out of a really good show. And I even say a great show. So it's your prerogative. But anyway, none of the people that are posting here are fit into that. So let's move on. And let's move on to LT's feedback. LT from NC says, so no intro at all, dropping right into the kablooey. That was another thing that made it even shorter, because it didn't have the swooping in Discovery showing that. It just plopped right into it. So that made it even shorter.
Maybe that's another indicator of this isn't necessarily a Star Trek Discovery short. Like they don't want it.
I think that's what they were going for. Yes. Star Trek Pike.
Yeah, like they don't want it to necessarily be directly linked with Star Trek Discovery, because even the Trouble with Edward had that disco entry.
I still think that they aren't going to announce a Pike series, although I would love them to do it. They're not going to do it until season 3 of Discovery gets underway and they address the Section 31 series and how that's going to play out, because they still have to get, assuming that is going forward, and I have more to say on it in the news, but if that goes forward with Giorgio as a Section 31 officer, then you have to answer, well, does that take place in the 23rd century? And if it does, how does she get back, number one, and how does that affect the Enterprise? That, like, I could see that Section 31 show have the Enterprise in it. So it not necessarily be a Pike specific Enterprise show, but Pike and Spock and number one and the Enterprise be in the Section 31 show. Because we don't know what the Enterprise did in the 5-year mission prior to Kirk's 5-year mission. We don't know that. So it could have been involved in covert stuff. We don't know. So we'll see. I'm willing to give that the benefit of the doubt, though, for now. Anyway, continuing, I knew it had to be Pike because he was a headliner, and the Black Hood was kind of a giveaway. That said, the stress of the scene drove home the tension of the situation. So then I watched it again, and the realist came back. So you have a cadet officer in a control hub on a space station, and someone dumps off a prisoner to babysit. This just bugged me, but not enough to make me dislike the episode. The back and forth quoting regulations was not only cool to watch, but it has several tie-ins to established canon. Yeah, it did actually. There were some things I think that were mentioned by them in Voyager, and I think some other things from, I'd have to go back and look at the actual regulations, but there were some things that were mentioned in past shows, and I know Voyager was one of those shows. I have to say, I love the way Pike's expression changed from that moment where she pulled the phaser on him to the point he ended the test. Once again, kudos to Anson Mount for making Pike such a nuanced character. I'm going to run with this for a second, since someone has been carping about the cadets on ship's theme that Disco seems to have embraced. If you roll out the canon manual, Kirk supposedly did time shipboard as a midshipman, and if you look a little deeper, the term cadet and midshipman are pretty synonymous outside the U.S. military, so I'm not so wound up having cadets on board. Besides, we have no way of knowing that after her tour in engineering, if Cadet Sidhu goes back to graduate and becomes Ensign Sidhu. Did this fire up more desire to get a Pike show? Do I even need to ask? The short treks so far have stepped up the bar, and now we'll have to wait for more. Come on, Picard show. Yes, well, we are getting closer and closer for the Picard show. So, all right. You want to do the last one?
All right. So we had one more tiny little piece of feedback. Clint from Facebook says, great episode, even if it is contained in just one room. Without trying, I saw that this was some sort of training simulation. The only downside of the episode is that it makes you crave a Pike-focused series even more. I concur.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And I have to say, I agree with LT about the whole whoever was carping about cadets on ships. I don't see any real problem with that. I mean, how else are they going to get real life experience? Personally, I think it's a better idea than having someone on your ship who's never seen any kind of action. Like, I don't know. I guess that happens in real life, but it seems a little less.
All right. Do you have any other notes for this episode?
No. I just watched it yesterday, and while I liked it all right, I guess I wanted a little bit more. I liked it, but I kind of wished that I had more of it. I wished that it was, shut up. I know I just repeated myself.
No, that's not why I was laughing.
Oh, why were you laughing?
Because it was too short.
I wished I had more of, I'm not sure that I necessarily wished I had more of that, but I think I wished I had more of something. I don't know what I wish there were more of, but it just kind of seemed like, I don't know, I really wanted more, I guess, bridge crew stuff, really, than this. I mean, while this was fine for what it was, I did know it was a test right from the beginning, so that did kind of, I guess, maybe color my perception of the episode, because to me there was no real danger or drama or whatever you know, however you want to phrase it. It wasn't that intense for me, because I knew already. I'm like, well, A, Pike would never do that, and 2, it's Pike.
Right. Yeah, and if anything, Pike had demonstrated himself to be a paragon of Starfleet virtue. So
right.
It does not fit into his character. And I think, that was pretty glaring as far as this episode. But what you're basically saying is you agreed with me that it was too short. That's why I was laughing.
Fine, Brian. I will agree with you.
I will say this.
I'm going to let you take that win.
I will say this, that I have had similar criticisms so far of The Mandalorian. I thought that especially the first 2 episodes were really short. The second one in particular was
they're
really
only
short.
supposed to be like a half hour, right?
No. Are they?
Yeah. I'm pretty
Huh.
sure.
Hmm.
They're not hour-long episodes. They're like half-hour
No.
episodes. The first one was a little long.
I know the fourth one was the longest so far, and that was around 40 minutes. But
Was it?
yeah.
I'm pretty sure that it's only supposed to be like 30 minutes.
I mean, if that's the case, that's fine. It's not something I realized, but I mean, that was the thing that I got out of watching them. And unlike Star Trek, I've only watched those once each. So I don't know. I may have a better impression of it going forward after I watch them more than once. But and because that is Star Wars and not Star Trek, I have to say,
What is this bizarre segue that's happening right now? Can we maybe stay on point?
Okay, sure.
So me complaining about something being too short, it's not something that, yeah.
Well, I really don't know, but I do think that it's only supposed to be like a half hour, and therefore the first one was a bit long, and I guess the fourth one was a bit long. I didn't realize it was so long. I enjoyed it muchly.
If that's true, okay. I mean, I would like to see them longer, but whatever. But I will say
your
that
format is your format.
I did not hear that it was that case. So
I don't know. Maybe we should Google it. Maybe Google knows. Google knows everything.
Oh, I'd say we do that after after we're done recording. But anyway, I will say that if this is the last of the Discovery, I mean, I'm hoping that maybe in between Picard and Discovery, we'll have more short treks and they will cover Discovery. Like, we don't know the time frame as far as Lower Decks is concerned and how that will fit into things. The fact that we didn't hear from them in for San Diego Comic-Con, sorry, not San Diego Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, makes me think that it is not going to come out like very soon. I'm thinking that Discovery is going to be out before Lower Decks, but we'll see. I've heard some people think that Discovery won't be out until the fall of 2020, and to me, that's too late, but we'll see.
That's a long time.
We shall see. Okay, so let's move on to ship-wide announcements. Just a few general things. One thing I think fits into Discovery, but that's the third thing I have listed. William Shatner was awarded the Officer in the Order of Canada. I think that's how you say it. Like, there's 3 levels of the Order of Canada. That's basically, given to people that have been like exceptional.
I have no idea. It's all you.
Well, I'm Canadian, yes. But anyway, like Donald Sutherland just got the Companion of the Order of Canada. I think that's what it's called. And that is the highest level. Officer is the second highest level. And then Member of the Order of Canada is the third highest level. But basically, these are ways to distinguish Canadians that have like added to the cultural identity, to the culture, to the entertainment, to scientific, political stuff. It's a number of different medicine, number of different things that are honored for that. Essentially, exceptional Canadians, and William Shatner, who's 88 years young, was just awarded like the second highest in that, the Officer in the Order of Canada. So that's pretty cool.
Kind of like being knighted if you're British.
It's very similar to that. Yes. And that is there's something called the Order of Merit, and that is like awarded to people that are like part of the Commonwealth. And I think there's like only one living Canadian that has that. Most of the rest are Order of Canada. So anyway, Michael Chabon, and this is more appropriate to Picard, but I thought I would post it on here as well. There was an interview of him and a video of him talking on StarTrek.com, And there's actually two things about Michael Chabon that's worth noting. So the first one is this discussion on StarTrek.com where it's a 2-part video where he talks about his experience with Star Trek and how he came to it. And then he talks about like what it's like to be running the show and how it's like a dream come true and how this is like his dream job. And more about like Picard and the show itself. And he's a guy that, combined with the next part I'm going to say, is he did an article recently in the New Yorker, and he talks about, this is actually Discovery related, the episode Q&A, which he wrote. He wrote it while he was with his father, who was dying. And it was during the time that he was writing Q&A, his father died. And there's a brilliant article, and I believe I posted it in the Facebook group. So there's a link to it there. But he talks about his love of Star Trek, how he was introduced to it by his father, and working through the story while at the same time talking about his father dying and, you know, his relationship with his father. And it is masterfully written. It is a great article if you take away Star Trek entirely from it. If he was talking about some other show or writing a novel or something, it is a wonderful, brilliant article. I highly recommend that you read it. There is a link to it on the New Yorker website where you can actually listen to the article. It's like professionally read, like an audiobook would be. And that's how I consumed it. Anyway, brilliant. Definitely listen to it. And my take on it after watching those first two videos that are on StarTrek.com and also reading this New Yorker article, this is the guy that we want in charge of Picard, because he gets it. He gets Star Trek. He gets Picard. He shows that he's not, like, one thing I will say negative about the previous showrunners, Aaron Harberts and Gretchen J. Berg, those two, they were coming at it not as a lover of Star Trek. He is a lover of Star Trek. He speaks to it well. He writes incredibly well. And that just gives me a great appreciation for what we're about to see starting next month. So if you haven't read that, Ruthie, I do recommend it.
All right. I'm not sure if I have. I can't remember. It's been a while.
I'll point it out to you. The last article is from Vanity Fair, and it was published on November 29th, actually. So just on Friday, from Alex Kurtzman and Julie McNamara, who's the executive vice president of original content for CBS All Access, where the duo discussed Trek on streaming, Picard, and briefly touched a few other things, including the Section 31 show. So he says on there, we are very excited about the Section 31 show, and Michelle Yeoh is excited to do it. Oh, I'm sorry. This was Julie McNamara saying it, not Kurtzman. She is in the current season of Discovery, so she's working on that right now, but we have scripts getting written, and Alex has a writer's room. We love what we've heard so far. It's yet another tonality of Trek as Alex has mapped it all out. Each show has its own unique sort of voice and vision. He continues, he mentions, I won't quote everything, but he says that the tone of the show, he likened it to the Clint Eastwood film Unforgiven. And I looked that up, and it's basically an aging outlaw and killer goes on one more job. So, and in some ways that also fits for Picard, I think, because, like, you know, one more final mission kind of thing. So, but that article is a good one. And I'll have a link to that It's also, there was a good summary of it on trekmovie.com. So if you'd rather read the summary, you can go to that. Why don't you tell people how to submit their feedback and connect with us?
Alrighty. To submit your theories or feedback or generally connect with us, you can do so by going to talkthroughmedia.com/feedback, where you can submit text or audio. You can also call us at 216-232-6146. You can send us an email, StarTrekDiscovery@talkthroughmedia.com, or you can post in our designated episode thread in our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts. You can also tweet us at Star Trek TTM.
A great way you can support us is to share our posts on Twitter when we post them. And although you can't share the posts that are on the Star Trek Talk Through Media Facebook group, because that's a closed group, we'll post our most shareable things on the Talk Through Media Facebook page, and that's at facebook.com/Talk Through Media. You can help to tell people about the podcast, and word of mouth is the best way for us to connect with new people and get new listeners. So help us out with that. Subscribe to us in Apple Podcasts or the podcast client of your choice. While you're there, we would really like it if you could give us a 5-star rating and or review. That helps us get noticed within the many different Star Trek podcasts that exist. And give us an honest review, but a 5-star review would be the greatest thing. That helps people see us. So, but whatever. That's main thing is we hope for an honest review. Be nice, and we understand we're not for everybody, but we think we do a good podcast. And our Patreon is still going. We will be doing some Patreon stuff. And I mentioned in the last episode that if you're on the Patreon, you will have gotten from me a message asking you about some stuff, because we have some ideas for some Patreon exclusive content. And we'd like to know, if you're a Patreon subscriber, what you would like to hear. And I'll say, if you are not a Patreon subscriber, but would like to become one and want to see us do that kind of content, and if we did it, you'd be interested, let us know that as well. You can send us some feedback or just simply post on the Facebook group. But we're most interested in hearing from our Patreon subscribers. So our patrons will be getting that content. So anyway, that's at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Brian and Ruthie. And we would like to thank our patrons, Clint, LT, James, Fred, and Kyle. Subscribe to our new podcast. That's the Star Trek Picard cast. You have gotten the first episode of it in this feed. You should have gotten it back in October. We will be releasing some new content very shortly. Actually, that's the next thing we'll be recording. So, not today though, Ruthie, don't worry.
I was going to say, my butt's numb.
No, we're done. We're done. So you'll be hearing some new Picard content. You can also hear me on the Walking Dead Talk Through. We just finished our mid-season finale, and that won't be back until February. But I will probably be way too busy to continue my work on that podcast, so I'll probably be stepping back in the second half. And I'm pretty sure I'm not going to cover the new series. So I'm not into young adult. It's just not my thing. Our next episode, actually, I don't know if we're going to release that as a single episode or two. It comes out next Thursday, I believe, the 12th of December. That is the two animated short treks. Ephraim and Dot is the first one, and then The Girl Who Made the Stars, which has to do with that little story that was at the beginning of season 2, episode 1, Brother, that Burnham talks about. So I believe that that's related to that. So they come out on the same night, December 12th. So I don't know if we'll do that as a separate episodes or as one single. We'll figure that out once it comes out. But until then, I'm Brian.
And I'm Ruthie.
Peace and long life.
Live long and prosper.